And he was announcing, here's the plan. He was announcing that we're going to reject, and the government cabinet has voted unanimously that we reject any externally imposed deal with the Arabs, the so-called Palestinians. There is not going to be any superimposed external Palestine solution. And under any and all circumstances, we are not going to agree to have another Arab sovereignty west of the Jordan River. And then he brought that to the Knesset for a vote of the 120 Knesset members. And the vote was something like 90-30 standing by the government, which for Israel and the Knesset is quite extraordinary, because there are so many people who are there just to fight and just to be the opposition. And keep in mind, there's right away 15 Arabs out of the 120 on the Knesset. 15 of them are from Arab parties, and they're against the existence of the state of Israel. And any normal country would not even allow them to run for office. But Israel lets them run, and they end up with 15 seats. And what you're going to see here is what goes on regularly in the Knesset. Constantly, in the middle of speeches, even the prime minister, people sitting in the Knesset start yelling and screaming at each other. And in this case, when Netanyahu announces that this has been an extraordinary vote, Ahmed Tibi, an Arab party member who was an assistant to Yasser Arafat, this guy should either be expelled from the country, if not in prison. And instead he sits in the Knesset. And so they have to throw him out. So that's just a little bit of background for what you're going to see. But then it's going to get more interesting the way I've put it together. Let's get cooking. Okay. Without further ado. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody in the Knesset, including the opposition. And this character, Yair Lapid, is the head of the opposition. Yair Lapid is very far to the left. And he had no choice but to vote with the 90 that we're just not going to allow for an externally imposed plan. And so he's a little morose that he's getting thanked for having basically backed the Netanyahu government, which he didn't want to do.
בעד הצעתי שישראל תתנגד, שיכתיבו לה באופן חד צדדי הקמת.
I want to thank everybody here in this Knesset for voting by an enormous majority that we will reject unequivocally any kind of one-sided, externally imposed peace plan. We're going to do it only direct talks with the Arabs, us and them, we and they, not externally imposed. There will not be a Palestine state. At this point, Ahmed Tibi starts screaming. This is Tibi. This is Ahmed Tibi. He's one of the Arabs. Obviously, this is a member of the Arab parties. This guy's an Arab party guy. This guy's an Arab party guy. This guy is Ben Gvir, Itamar Ben Gvir, who's the head of the Otzma Yehudit, the right-wing party. Every time Tibi disrupts a speech in the Knesset, Ben Gvir turns around and starts pointing at him and saying, if you don't like it, why don't you go back where you come from in Syria? And that's what's going on. It becomes a circus. And you'll notice Netanyahu, he knows from experience, this is just part of being the prime minister of Israel. And you just wait it out for 30 seconds to a minute until they throw this guy out of the room. And Ben Gvir is basically saying, go back to where you come from, Syria or Egypt or wherever. And this is just going back and forth. And this guy is waiting until he gets the official call from the Speaker of the Knesset to throw out Tibi. And now the Knesset chairman, speaker just said, first warning to Knesset member Tibi. Meantime, as you can see, this guy, he's just looking at his email. They're only voting on whether the country's going to exist. But while this is going on, he's looking through his email. And now they're throwing him out. And now he's got 3 people walking him out. And it's part of the deal. Like, there's not like a big fight about not walking out. He gets thrown out 3 times a week. This is what goes on. And Netanyahu just knows you can't wing it at the Knesset. You have to have a written speech so you don't lose your momentum when this happens.
לא לעזור לי בבקשה. חבר הכנסת איימן עודה, קריאה ראשונה.
Okay, that's warning to Ayman Oda. He's another Arab in the Knesset. Is nothing wrong with being an Arab in the Knesset. There are some of the other parties of Arabs, but there's the Arab parties. They exist for the destruction of Israel. And so he's being warned, number 1, but he's not going to get thrown out. He's going to stop. That's warning number 2 on Oda.
היושב-ראש, אני לא זוכר
I don't remember.
הרבה הצבעות,
I don't remember too many votes in this Knesset
אפילו מעט הצבעות,
in a long, long time, even hundreds of votes.
שהכנסת
Okay, now I just wanted you to feel a little bit better to see what goes on in the British Parliament. Now, something wild happened this week when it comes to Israel and Gaza. In the Jewish people, for Israel, for America, for the whole world, the rest of the world was going on also. And so that's what we're going to go back to and let the British figure themselves out for next week. And maybe they will, maybe they won't. Let's continue. Israel, under pressure from Britain, the likes of the Labour Party and the Scottish National Party, and the European Union, and the United Nations, has been forced to send medicine to Gaza. And because of the poor Palestinians, the poor innocent Gazans. And Israel's position has been, we'll do it, but we want to know we can get medicine to our people, the hostages. And Israel was guaranteed by the European Union, the British, the Americans, United Nations, the International Red Cross, you give us the medicine, your hostages will get the medicine. This past week, Israeli soldiers happened to raid Nasser Medical Complex down in southern Gaza as part of the effort to root out Hamas. Many Hamas leaders actually are based in hospitals. You know that by now. They base their weapons in the hospitals. They build their tunnels under the hospitals. And while Israel was rooting them out, they happened to come across medicines that the hospital pharmacy. Turns out all these medicines Israel had sent to get to the hostages had never been delivered.
נמצאים כרגע בבית החולים נאצר בלב ח'אן יונס, במבנה הדיאליזה בבית המרקחת. מצאנו כאן בבית המרקחת תרופות שככל הנראה היו אמורות להגיע לחטופים, ממש עם מיתוג בשם החטוף. ניתן לראות פה תמונות, את התמונות חטפו, חלק מהכיתובים עוד נשארו. תמר מצגר, עד השגיא, ממש ניתן לראות עם התמונה. יפה אדם. והתרופות של חטופים שלא שוחררו עדיין, חיים פרי. חטופים שעדיין מוחזקים בשבי ופשוט לא קיבלו את התרופות שלהם. ניתן לראות שלא נעשה שום שימוש בתרופות. הגיעו כאן לבית המרקחת, עדיין חדשות. לא הועברו לחטופים. יש כאן עוד מגוון תרופות כאלו שככל הנראה חמאס ניסו לטשטש את הראיות ולהוריד את המדבקות, ניתן לראות את הכיתוב בעברית ואת המיתוג באותו האופן. עוד מגוון תרופות כאלו, חלקן תרופות מצילות חיים שפשוט לא הגיעו לחטופים שלנו.
נאצר, מצאנו משלוח של תרופות לחטופים, ניתן לראות תרופות מלאות.
תרופות שהיה לפחות קירור ולא היו בקירור.
יש שם של כל חטוף, תרופות שצריכות להגיע אליו.
I want you to know, just another word on that. Just another word on that. I don't hide because there's no point in hiding, and I'm a public person, so there's just no way I could realistically hide. I had a lung transplant. This is old news by now. Every day I take 22 medicines, total of 31 tablets, and half of it in the morning, half of it at night. And they include, just mention three. There's something called Prograf or tacrolimus, and that's an immunosuppressant. And the purpose of the immunosuppressant is that our antibodies fight off foreign invasions, flu, virus, and our antibodies don't have brains, so they also fight off foreign organs. And if someone else's liver or heart or lung is in someone, they fight them off. And that's why many successful early transplants in the beginning of transplantation, the surgeries were successful, but people died a month later anyway. And nobody quite understood why. And then they figured it out. They had to figure out how to suppress the antibodies. If a person undergoes a transplant and does not take the tacrolimus, or the other major one is Cellcept, mycophenolate mofetil, that's not a good thing. And to hold somebody 3.5 months, God forbid, a transplant person being held 3.5 months by Hamas without getting their mycophenolate mofetil and their tacrolimus, they're not going to be around. We had on Sukkot, somebody was visiting on Sukkot. We were talking around the table on Sukkot, and someone had mentioned, we were talking about things, and somebody mentioned that they knew somebody who had gone on a cruise, like a 10-day cruise. And when they got to the cruise and they started unpacking, they realized, forgot to bring our medicine. All right, 10 days. And 10 days later, this transplant person was dead. So you need the medicine. This is not that they've got sore throats and they were counting on Tylenol. And the idea that if Israel had not entered that hospital searching for Hamas and their tunnels and their weapons, they never would have found the evidence, because Hamas claims, and the International Red Cross claims, and everybody's going around claiming, no, your Jewish people got all their medicine. And now they've got proof this week. It's all a lie. And they didn't get their medicine. And now we come to another anti-Semite, the head of Brazil. And this week, the head of Brazil, speaking at the African Union, accused Israel of what Israel's doing in Gaza as being equivalent to the Nazi Holocaust. And the world hasn't seen anything since the Nazi Holocaust like what Israel's done the last 3 months in Gaza. And so the Israeli Foreign Ministry responded that this guy is now persona non grata in Israel until he apologizes, yada, yada, yada. So let's catch this character.
President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, known by many simply as Lula, that started things off.
What is happening in the Gaza Strip with the Palestinian people has no parallel in other historical moments. In fact, it did exist when Hitler decided to kill the Jews.
Comparing Israel's mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza to the Holocaust drew an immediate reaction from Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu.
President Silva has disgraced the memory of 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis, and he's demonized the Jewish state like the most virulent anti-Semite. He should be ashamed of himself.
And on Monday, Israel's foreign minister summoned Brazil's ambassador to the country's Holocaust memorial for a public, pointed dressing down, culminating in this.
And we, as I asked to convey to President Lula, will not forget nor forgive, and I declare him, in my name and in the name of the citizens of Israel, as persona non grata in Israel, as long as he does not apologize and take it back.
But President Lula is not backing down. He recalled Brazil's ambassador to Israel for consultations and summoned the Israeli ambassador to Brazil for an explanation as this diplomatic dispute continues.
It's important to understand because we kind of take it for granted. We don't really pause to think about it. What was the Holocaust? Obviously, we're not going to spend 2 hours now on what was the Holocaust, not with our group. But it's worth taking a moment just to contemplate when the leftists march against Israel, accusing Israel of committing Hitlerite genocide. So the question is, in the last 3.5 months, has Israel announced at any single point, part of our goal is to completely exterminate the Arab people from the face of the earth. Toward that end, we're going to every single town, village, and neighborhood over which we have sovereignty or access, and we are sending in soldiers to pull all Arab civilians out of their homes, out of their attics, out of their bedrooms, and to line them up in center town squares, and then put them on trains to installations where we're going to methodically execute them immediately. And now we're taking tens and hundreds of thousands of Arabs, and we're putting them on trains to central locations where we're separating the men from the women, and we're taking all the Arab women and children first and marching them into gas chambers, while we have other Arabs, men, assigned to take out the dead bodies and then dig mass graves to put them in. Or we have ovens for which they can then take those bodies and put them in ovens. And let's go as quickly as we can. In Auschwitz, they murdered 12,000 Jews a day, 12,000 a day in Auschwitz. So let's see. The Arabs claim that Israel has killed 27,000, of which we know at least 9,000-10,000 are members of Hamas. So at most, Israel has killed 12 to 15,000 civilians. So in 3.5 months, the equivalent of 1 day in Auschwitz. So you're talking about when people just bandy about and they use terminology like this is Auschwitz and this is a Holocaust and this is genocide. It is so outrageously dishonest that just to bring out the facts itself demeans the 6 million, that it even needs a conversation or a discussion. Not that there's any reason to take great pride in the Holocaust. Not that there's any reason to have ownership of the Holocaust. I mean, frankly, I wish that on my enemies. Not that we should have to be the ones to do it, but I take no great joy in being and walking around with like a label or a badge. Hey, we had a Holocaust. I wish that on all of Israel's enemies, but it's not something we Jews do to them. And to have these people walking around like this fellow in Brazil, accusing Israel of the worst genocide since Hitler, it's just extraordinary. And of course, he also is a left-wing extremist, and that seems to be the era that we live in. The previous era, a few eras ago, the worst anti-Semitism came from the right-wing nationalists. And this era, it's from the left. It just shows that for Jews, you can't really say that you can't put all your chickens in the basket of the right or the left. You just hope you find good people, because ideologies, evil is evil, and it's on both sides. And we always somehow are the ones that they point to.
John Holman, Al Jazeera.
You know, it's Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is, of course, supported by Qatar. And that got me thinking back to a song by Bob Dylan about 10 years ago. It's not well known. Bob Dylan is famous for songs like Blowing in the Wind and Mr. Tambourine Man. I could start going with a list. Neighborhood Bully is probably the least well-known song of Bob Dylan.
I guess you have never heard about the Farhud, the 1941 pogrom against Jews in Iraq, in which hundreds of Jews were killed. I have in Muslim countries.
As you recall, we were watching this gentleman last week, and I mentioned that we would continue this week. And so we shall, a little bit each week. He was talking about the history of Muslim ethnic cleansing against Jews.
You on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Today there are no Jews in Yemen. The Jews in Iran have a very long history going back 2,500 years. Although today Iran is the main root of evil in the Middle East, I must say that of the supporters I have in Muslim countries, most of them are from Iran. I hope that the good people of Iran will bring down the cruel Islamic regime. I'm not going to try to summarize the history of Jews in Iran, but there is one short story about the Jews of the city of Mashad. In 1839, many years before the advent of the Zionist movement, there was a blood libel against the Jews. 30 Jews were killed and a few girls were abducted to become Muslim child brides. The community was forced to convert to Islam. For more than 100 years, the Jews kept their identity a secret. They were known in Mashhad as the new Muslims and continued to suffer at the hands of their Muslim neighbors. The converted Jews had to open their shops on Saturday to prove that they didn't observe the Shabbat, the Jewish day of rest. So despite opening the doors of their shop, they did their best not to sell anything to the customers. After the Islamic Revolution of 1979, they all fled to Israel. There are no more Jews in Mashhad. From Iran, let's move to the country next door, Iraq. I started this video by talking about the Farhud, and the thumbnail of this video is also taken from the Farhud pogrom. I'm focusing on it for two reasons. The Farhud was the largest pogroms against the Jews in terms of the number of deaths. Terrible things were done to the Jews, and many women were the R-word. I have to just stop here and say a word about this, about what's going on. You are not just watching my video, you are watching my video on YouTube. Now, I love YouTube and I love the Americans, but I really need to choose my words very carefully. I have to comply with the YouTube community guidelines, which are basically the YouTube rules. YouTube, stop calling them community guidelines. They have nothing to do with my community, with my subscribers, and they are not guidelines. They are strictly imposed American corporate, Puritan, politically correct rules. If I don't comply with them, YouTube reduces the exposure of this video by about 90%. It has happened to me a number of times in the last few weeks. That is why I'm not saying the word I really want to say, which is what happened. So the R word stands for making love, but without the love and the consent part, which is actually just pure evil and violence. So hundreds of Jewish women were subjected to the R word. The reason I chose this specific photo is that it doesn't show 1 or 10 or even 100 Arabs. You can see hundreds of Arabs armed with knives and cheering on their way to kill Jews. The Arab women were cheering too. There has never been any incident involving gangs of Jews or Israelis storming into an Arab village population and killing Arab children and subjecting Arab women to the R word. Never. Even after the Yom Kippur War or the suicide bombers, never has the Jewish mob done anything like it. Never. The Muslims, on the other hand, have done it, and they are still doing it to Jews and other minorities. In Hebrew, we refer to the Jewish community in Iraq as the Babylonian Jews, as the Jews in Iraq were there from the times of the great empires of the East, more than 1,000 years before the establishment of Islam. So there were 150,000 Babylonian Jews 80 years ago. Today, there are about 4 Jews left in Baghdad. Now, let's say a word about the largest Jewish diaspora in the Muslim world, the Jews of Morocco. My family originally came from Morocco. Just kidding. My family, like all Jewish family, originally come from Judea. The Jews are from Judea. Easy. If you speak to Jews from Morocco, many of them will have a few good things to say about their lives there. Lots of them will tell you that they used to be rich, and every other Moroccan Jew will tell you that their grandfather and the king were friends. When you hear their stories, you have to wonder if the Moroccan king spent all his time just taking selfies with Jews from 1940 till 1950. But seriously, I'm here talking about the other side, about the pogroms and the discrimination. So who is right? The Jews telling stories about how rich they were, or me? There are a few possible answers to this question, but the simple and truthful answer is we are both right. Jews can be successful despite being persecuted and discriminated against. They can still cherish some nice personal memories. There are plenty of examples of this, but let's go with the most obvious one. The Jews in Germany. They saw themselves as German. They contributed to society more than any other group, yet they were persecuted, and we all know how things ended. And many German Jews who migrate to Israel still had happy memories and missed a lot of things about their former lives. The second answer, and it is one that many Israelis are not going to like, is that Israelis, whether their grandparents came from Morocco or Syria or Poland, don't know their personal family history. Maybe you can name 3 or 4 different ethnic foods and you have heard a few stories from your grandparents, but that doesn't mean you actually know your history. There are many, many stories that your parents and grandparents didn't tell you because they wanted to protect you, the same way you want to protect your children and moderate the information you give them. The third answer has more to do with the nature of history itself. Personal memories may be part of history, but they often contradict it. As a tour guide, I often stand at a meeting point where history meets personal and collective memories. Personal memory is a living thing. It changes with time, it changes with collective memory, and it changes with personal experience. And if you go through a traumatic experience, like immigrating at the age of 6 or 13 or 17, leaving a place where you knew the people and the language and the culture, and moved to Israel, a poor country recovering from a war, where you need to sleep in a tent for years and you don't understand the culture and the language, all of this will affect the way in which you remember your past. Immigration is a traumatic experience. And let me remind you that
I want to just reinforce 2 things that he just said. And I want to thank Denise for bringing to my attention that the sound was off, so I re-optimized it. I wanted to bring 2 thoughts. When I was a college student, I paid my way through Colombia by working all summer for about 2 or 3 summers in the Catskill Mountains as a busboy. I never got promoted to being a waiter. I only got to be the busboy who would clear off the table and bring juices. I still remember a guy named Jake. I won't mention his last name. He was the head waiter, and he watched how slow I was as a busboy. And he said to me, "Dov, you're never going to amount to anything. You'll be a busboy all your life." And the interesting thing is, I think I found out 40 years later, after I had been chief articles editor of Law Review and had clerked for a federal judge and became rabbi and other things, I found out through some common connection that Jake was right. He still was a head waiter, and I had never gone beyond. I had never reached head waiter. I on the way to some of those other positions. While I was in my era of bussing the tables, I spent one summer part-time at a place called the Lake House, Lake House. It no longer exists. Most of my time was at the Pioneer Hotel, the Grossinger's Hotel, but a little time at the Lake House. The Lake House was created by immigrants from German Jews, and it was run by the Teddy Katz family, Teddy and Carol Katz, and their parents. I remember one time, it was around Sukkot, I think, in October, and I was making some money that weekend at Sukkot, and it was the same week as in New York City, the von Steuben parade. New York, with all its immigrants, has a special parade. I don't know what goes on in New York now. I haven't been there for 40 years, but they used to have one Sunday a year for each of their different ethnic groups. You would have Columbus Day parade for the Italians, Israel Day parade for the Jews, Martin Luther King Day parade for the blacks. You'd have the Pulaski Day parade for the Polish, and you had the von Steuben Day parade for Baron von Steuben, a German guy that helped America win the revolution. And I remember I was walking through the TV room, schlepping whatever busboy schleps, and I saw the grandparents, the parents of the owners, these 2 German Jewish immigrants who fled Hitler. And they were sitting there watching the Steuben Day parade, and they were softly singing all the German songs. And I'm sitting there thinking, as a Jewish kid around 20 years old, give or take, born in America, what kind of Jew in 1970 is sitting there humming the, I don't know if it was the Horst Wessel song, but I mean, humming these German songs. And the fellow is correct. We come from cultures, and even if the cultures have driven us out and hated us, we grew up with those melodies, and we grew up with the language, and we moved to a new country with new melodies and new language. And even as we adopt it, it's still not Sfatem. It's not the mother tongue. And people really always have that. And it's part of the Jewish experience for so many who have been forced into exiles and have never really had a place they could call home, permanent safe home, which is part of the reason Jews ended up in professions and not as farmers, other than in Israel. Because over the course of time, Jews learned that if you go into agriculture anywhere but Israel, sooner or later, the country's going to throw you out. And when they throw you out, you cannot take your property with you. You have to leave behind your farms. If you become a doctor, you can bring with you your education. If you become an attorney, if you get involved nowadays in high tech, if you go into jewelry, you could try to smuggle out your diamonds. But if you go into farming, you cannot get your property out. You're wiped out. If you go into international commerce, lending money on interest, banking, international banking, investing, you can get your assets out. That's how Jews ended up in commerce and all of these areas other than farming. It became a very big thing for Hitler and the Nazis in the 20th century to argue, and other peoples have argued also, that there's something wrong with Jews. why don't Jews work the land like other people? Well, you just got the answer. And then when Jews went to their own land, the land of Israel, turned out Jews make very good farmers. And Jews turned the desert into a garden. It's an interesting thing. I wanted to reinforce what he was talking about. The other thing, he talked about the Mashad community of Mashad, Iran, or Mashad, Persia. Back in the 1980s, when I was a rabbi on the East Coast, before I moved to Israel at the time, I was invited to speak one Shabbat. And I was told there's a shul in Queens, New York, the Mashad Shul. I never heard of them. And I went there and I learned their story. It is a community, as the guy said, everybody, or so many of us, have heard of the so-called Marranos or Conversos, the Jews who, under Spain during the time of Ferdinand and Isabel, were forced to convert to Catholicism, and in many cases converted externally, superficially, while secretly continuing as Jews. The exact same thing happened to the Jews of Mashad, Persia. An entire community, an entire city of Jews, one of the most strong Jewish communities in Iran, all were forced to become Muslim until they finally either were killed out or they were forced to move out. And many of them ended up in this one shul in Queens. I'll never forget it. I spoke there on Shabbat, and they were the most Zionist, most supportive. And I was the guest speaker, as I said. And I spoke about 20 minutes where the rabbi's sermon would be. What I did not know at the time is that 80% of the people in the shul did not speak any English. They only spoke Farsi, the Persian language. And they had this one incredible guy. I never met anyone like him in my life. I didn't even know he was what he was till I found it afterwards. This one guy, his job is, they bring in a guest speaker every week. I don't know if it still goes on now. He listens carefully to the speech, the 20-minute sermon, and then he gives over the same exact sermon, every word for 20 minutes in Farsi. And it's Shabbat. He doesn't write a word. He just somehow is able to memorize every single word he heard for 20 minutes. Now, how do I know? First, he got up, explained briefly, I'm going to tell the people who don't speak English what you were just talking about. I said, okay. I thought he's going to talk 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. He goes on for 20 minutes. And at certain points in the 20 minutes, I had referred to Franklin Roosevelt during the Holocaust. I'd made certain references like that. Maybe I made a reference to Auschwitz. Maybe I made a reference to the Irgun. And I would hear him talking like 7, 8 minutes in Farsi babble, with all the respect to Farsi. And all of a sudden, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And then back to the Farsi. And all of a sudden, the Irgun, Menachem Begin. And then back to the Farsi. And there was even one point where he said something where I had thrown in a joke. And all I know is he started talking. Next thing I know, everybody there is laughing. And I guess he knew how to tell a good joke in Farsi. And so it just lets you, it's an extraordinary community, the Mashad community.
Rabbi, I just wanted you to know that I wanted you to know that I'm Persian. And
at the end of the Shabbat sermon, a person came over to me and said to me, would you please come to our office on Monday with your wife? We'd like to give you a gift. And I explained, I'm here and you paid me an honorarium. And he insisted, and I happened to work in Manhattan, not far from him. I was national director of the Likud Zionists. So I went there to meet with him at his fact. It turned out he had a Persian rug factory. So I go in there, I see him, hi, Rabbi Fischer. He says, thank you very much for honoring me. Let me introduce you to all of my workers. They're all my relatives. And he says, okay, thank you for coming. I'd like you to take a rug home. I said, he insisted he wouldn't let me leave without taking a rug. He gave me a rug. It was worth like $3,000, $4,000. And I'm talking 1985. He wouldn't let me leave without a rug. And I mean, I have no self-respect. I'm a rabbi. I'm not So I said, I can't accept the rug. You wouldn't let me go out. They like to close the doors. So I come back home, brought home the rug. For those of you that have ever been to my home, that's the one in the living room. So I get a phone call that night from this guy, another guy, heavy Persian accent. Hello, Rabbi Fischer. Yes. I understand you were just at my nephew's home, nephew's factory, and you accepted a rug from my nephew. It brings shame to my family if my nephew can tell people on Shabbat that he gave you a rug, and I cannot tell people I gave you a bigger rug. I'm his uncle. You must come and accept the rug from me. I said, I wasn't even into Persian rugs. He says, you must accept the rug from me. I cannot face the shame in my congregation. I will have to start going to an Ashkenazic congregation. I said, I don't want to put you through that kind of persecution. So I go there, and I remember talking to my wife, what color, what's the color and pattern we're looking for? Next thing I know, they have like every one of them has a factory. If you've ever been in my home, you've seen about 5 or 6 Persian rugs. It was the week I cleared out Mashad. They're an extraordinarily giving, warm, loving, just unbelievable people. As I heard his story, I wanted to share that. Let me continue. And I know I've been talking a lot more than I necessarily planned, but we still can get in a lot of our program, and I may have to leave some of it for next week also. Let's continue. Let's continue. Oops. And let's make sure I've got that sound optimized, because if I forget to optimize it, it becomes very blurry. I believe it's on optimized. Yeah, it's on optimized now. And let me give you back your sound as well. Let me unmute. Yes. Okay. Here we go. Come on. Okay.
Senator Rubio, will you call for ceasefire in Gaza?
You know, Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, it has now become a very big thing on the left to go with their smartphones and to stop congressmen and congressional representatives and senators in the hallways of Congress and get them on video, trying to get them to either condemn Israel or to say something supportive of Israel that they could put on TikTok to create an outrage. And here they're ganging up on Rubio, Marco Rubio of Florida.
Rubio,
are you filming it?
Wait,
so I want you guys to get this. I want them to destroy every element of Hamas they can get their hands on. These people are vicious animals who did horrifying crimes. And I hope you guys post that.
And what about the civilians that are being killed every day?
Hamas should stop hiding behind civilians, putting civilians in the way. Hamas knew that this was going to lead to this. So Hamas should stop building their military installations underneath hospitals.
So you don't care that 15,000 have died? You don't care about the babies that are being killed every day?
Horrifying. I think it's terrible, and I think Hamas is 100% to blame. That's what I think. Make sure you post that, please.
Right? Because the goal is to get him to say, in a moment of anger, no, I don't care. And then that's all they clip out and they will show on TikTok. He did an extremely good job. This just happened in the last 24 hours. Israel knocking out more of Gaza.
זה יכול להתחיל בשכונה, ואני רוצה
לא ללא תנאים מבצעיים.
לא יודע להגיד לאן זה יתפתח. יש מי שעוסק בזה, אנחנו עוסקים בלחימה. אני רוצה שתדעו דבר אחד, יש קשר בין הדברים. ההישגים שלכם, עוד גדוד שאתם מפרקים, עוד תשתית תת קרקע, עוד שכונה שמבצעים שם את השמדת התשתיות והאוכלוסייה שמתפנה למרחבים בטוחים, כל הדברים האלה ביחד לוחצים אותנו, אני מקווה מאוד, גם להישג בעניין שחרור החטופים. זו מטרת מלחמה, יש לנו כוונה לעשות הרבה מאוד כדי לממש אותה, ומאמץ הלחימה הוא הפעולה הכי אפקטיבית שעוזרת למי שנושא ונותן בכל מיני מקומות על שחרור החטופים. זה המנוף שאנחנו מורידים על חמאס, ואתם מורידים אותו מצוין, צריך להמשיך ולהוריד אותו חזק. אני מקווה שנדע לתרגם אותו גם לשחרור החטופים.
And meantime, this is going on in the north, in southern Lebanon, where Hezbollah is based. It's two fronts, and Israel's taking out significant amounts of installations of the Hezbollah terrorists up north. One more look at what happened last week when they liberated one more look at what happened last week when Israel knocked out a bunch of terrorists while liberating the two hostages from Argentina. It was extraordinary. I was told the sound was a little bit off last week. I wanted you to...
לראשונה, מאז המבצע ההירואי בלב רפיח, התיעודים הדרמטיים מאותן השניות, בהן לוחמי הימ"מ ושב"כ פשטו על המבנה בו שהו החטופים פרננדו ולואיס, נחשפים. כך זה נראה ב-1:45 בלילה לפני יומיים.
It was 1:45 in the middle of the night. A combined force of the Shabak, the security forces, the Shin Bet, and Yamam, which is a highly trained separate unit of the police department that actually engages overseas as well in police sort of evacuations and rescues.
בשכונת שבורה.
In the Shabura neighborhood of Rafiah.
הכוחות פורקים מהרכבים המיוחדים בדממה מוחלטת בחושך מוחלט.
חוטפים את הבית
מכל עבר. כשבמקביל כוחות נוספים נתפסים על גג הבניין ומחוץ לדלת הדירה מחכים לאות הפריצה.
And you've got Israeli forces surrounding the building and keeping their eye on the building from all sides and bombing right around the building to keep terrorists from disrupting the operation.
ואז זה קורה קרב קשה עם המון אש שנפתח.
Then an extraordinary exchange of fire as they have to deal both with the terrorists who are watching the prisoners, hostages, as well as to take down the security door that was going to try to bar them from getting in.
כוח הפריצה נמצא בקומה השנייה, ובקומה הראשונה מסביב למבנה לוחמי הימ"מ ושב"כ מודדים עם עשרות מחבלים.
They actually had to fight against tens of terrorists who were guarding the place, and they had to work their way up to the second floor, which is where the hostages were being held. So they were successful in eliminating every single one of the terrorists without any of the Israeli armed forces being killed. It was a heroic fight.
כשהגענו לאיתור, פרצנו פנימה ונתקלנו בהתנגדות קשה, ירי מסיבי מתוך הבית ומהפריפריה.
We encountered an incredibly massive attack on us from all over the place, the periphery of the building. We returned fire and we eliminated the terrorists.
ישבנו באש וחיסלנו מחבלים, תוך כדי פריצה איתרנו את החטופים וחילצנו אותם מהמבנה. לאחר מכן הוצאנו אותם מהמרחב, תוך כדי שאנחנו מתמודדים עם התנגדות מהפריפריה ומגנים על חייהם של החטופים עד אשר...
We were able to get out the two hostages under fire continuing from all the surrounding periphery, and we were able to get them out home in peace.
שבנו אותם הביתה בשלום.
היחידה הכי טובה שיש.
חד משמעית. גאווה גדולה.
I wanted to share with you also, we talk so much about how the whole world is, or so many are busy attacking Israel. It is amazing what comes out of Israel. A small country of 7.5 million Jews and 1.5 million Arabs. And what comes out of Israel, despite all the pressures to which she is subjected by so many, even the way we began today in England, where parties are fighting with each other over who gets to be the one to propose the resolution criticizing Israel. In the meantime, while they're all busy, and I understand the sound wasn't great, but you had the words on the screen, the Bob Dylan song about the neighborhood bully. Here you've got this country that just produces all this extraordinary stuff. Nowadays, with medical imaging, CT scans and MRIs, X-rays, it's actually gotten to the point that radiology has become, while more sophisticated, more complex. And they've just apparently created this new thing, well,
as medical imaging technology becomes more precise and accessible, radiology is increasingly becoming a key foundation of modern medicine, helping guide diagnostics, treatment, and prognoses. But the growing utility of medical imaging also has its downside. With over 75% of all patient care involving radiology, the amount of imaging is skyrocketing, while the number of radiologists is struggling to catch up.
Typical CT scan contains hundreds of images, historical exams, plus relevant clinical information, and radiologists are already drowning in data.
Radiologists are being pressured to produce quality results at a faster pace with increasing amounts of data, but with tools that are not up to the task.
In critical conditions, if we fail to detect an abnormality on time, a patient could lose their life.
ADOC solves this problem by providing radiologists with the most advanced solutions to increase efficiency and expedite patient care within their existing work environment.
Radiology departments reach out to ADOC when they look to improve their workflow utilizing the latest advances in artificial intelligence. Our AI is always on. It constantly runs in the background, analyzes every relevant exam right after the patient left the scanner. And once it detects this critical abnormality, we help the radiologist by highlighting those critical areas to help him prioritize life-threatening cases and really expedite patient care.
ADOC's solution is designed to seamlessly integrate into the radiologist's workflow, The hybrid approach includes an on-premise component that pulls the scans directly from the source, de-identifies it on-premise, and then sends it to the cloud for detection. Once the detection is completed, the scan is re-identified on-premise and sent back to the radiology workstation. The whole process happens behind the scenes before the scan reaches the radiologist.
We realized that the only way to overcome the gap between the increase in scans and flat growth in the number of radiologists would be with technology.
Comprised of veterans from the IDF's elite technology unit, Talpiot, the ADOC team combines cutting-edge innovation with dedicated belief in making a real impact on the radiologist's day-to-day productivity. By bolstering the efficiency and accuracy of trained, experienced radiologists, ADOC helps them do what they do best: diagnose.
The solution basically helps a radiologist sift through the heaps of data to find what's really important to streamline his workflow.
The last 2.5 years that we have been actively using AI. And for us, it's really been a game changer for me, as well as my.
Remember, Cedars-Sinai is where I had my transplant, and they are really just cutting edge right now in so many areas, no pun intended, of course. And part of the process was all these MRIs and CT scans and X-rays and just exams all the time. And it was nice when I was preparing class to see that Cedars-Sinai is also on cutting edge with this stuff.
My colleagues across the board, neuroimagers, people who do ED imaging particularly, people who are working at night. And for us, it's really made a huge difference.
A vendor or a partner who has good algorithms that will fulfill some of your early needs, and at the same time, a vendor whom one believes will survive in what is ultimately going to be a shakeout, and a vendor who gives you good support and shows you they have an eye to the future, because we're really just at the beginning of this right now.
It's always on. It's on every PACS machine. So even when you're in the ultrasound room and there is a CT scan of the brain, which is positive by ADOC, then it will show up. It will pop up. It's bright orange. You can't miss it. So everybody was constantly looking at the results of ADOC through the widget. That we have a user engagement of 100% every time.
There are hundreds of AI groups.
And this is just one more example. There are many, but I just don't have time for all of it. But here's one more quick example.
Expand possibilities with the Mazorak system, a surgical assurance platform for spine surgery, integrating advanced application analytical tools, guidance, and imaging technologies to maximize procedure predictability and patient benefit. Mazorax consists of sophisticated software and algorithms running on a workstation and a precision guidance system with a surgical arm. The workstation includes a large touchscreen serving as a surgeon control panel, hardware components, and storage for the guidance system. The guidance system is made up of the following components: the surgical arm, an integrated 3D camera with spatial tracking, a surgeon control panel in the sterile area. The Mazorak System's surgical assurance platform integrates 3 processes: pre-op analytics, intra-op guidance, and intra-op verification. Pre-op analytics are performed using cutting-edge anatomy recognition abilities for surgical visualization and imaging-based 3D implant and trajectory placement planning. The patient's CT is analyzed to recognize anatomical landmarks using proprietary algorithms. The planning may take place prior to the surgery or during the surgery using scan and plan. The Mazorak System's 3D planning software allows for preoperative identification of unique dysplastic features using 3D visualization of the patient anatomy. The software interface allows the surgeon to view and modify the plan in axial, lateral, and AP views until fully satisfied with the position of implants or trajectories. The surgeon can review the surgical plan in a virtual video mode, displaying the anatomy slice by slice in all 3 anatomical planes. The advanced Mazor-X Align application enables surgeons to create a patient-specific 3-dimensional spinal alignment plan based on standing X-ray images and an innovative virtually weight-bearing CT scan. The 3D alignment plan provides simulation and visualization of the impact of a correction on the entire spine, increasing outcome predictability. The resulting plan is ready for the surgeon in the operating room. Intra-op guidance utilizes precision mechanics and the surgical arm to guide tools according to the surgical plan. This portion of the procedure begins by rigidly attaching a mount to the patient's spine. Once the platform is mounted, the 3D camera maps the surface of the patient and the surrounding area to produce a 3D image of the entire surgical field. Next, 2 fluoroscopic images are taken with a 3D marker to match the pre-op surgical plan with the intra-op anatomy. Each vertebral body is registered independently with its own distinct accuracy, with Mazor's proprietary CT to fluoro registration process. Intra-op verification uses the Mazor XI, an integrated 3D camera with spatial tracking. The software guides the surgical arm into position, translating the surgical plan to precision guidance in the surgical field. Before instrumenting, the Mazor XI camera provides intra-op verification of the surgical arm position. Once verification is complete, the surgical arm and drill guide keep tools and implants on target for each trajectory. This process continues until all trajectories have been reached and implants are inserted safely and accurately into their planned position. Mazor-X, the core of the surgical assurance platform.
Israel is a small but mighty country. Here are 10 of the greatest Israeli innovations that have changed the world. Mobileye, an advanced driver assistance system for vehicles that uses cameras to provide real-time warnings and help prevent accidents. This has literally saved the lives of many drivers. USB flash drive. Developed by Dov Moran in 1995, the flash drive allows for easy transfer and storage of digital data. Iron Dome. The Iron Dome missile defense system is designed to intercept and destroy short-range rockets and artillery shells fired from distance up to 70 kilometers. Countless of Israeli civilians are alive today thanks to this defense system that stopped rockets from hitting their houses, and many countries are looking into buying this amazing system. Waze, a GPS navigation app that provides real-time traffic updates and route planning based on crowdsourced data. With Waze, you avoid traffic and get faster to your destination. Pilcam. Pilcam is a capsule endoscope that enables non-invasive examination of the digestive tract without the need for invasive procedures such as colonoscopies. Solar-powered water heaters. Developed in the 50s, Israeli solar water heaters are now used in over 150 countries around the world, providing clean and cost-effective hot water. Israel is environmental friendly. Cherry tomatoes. Developed by Israeli scientists in the 70s, cherry tomatoes have since become a popular crop worldwide due to their high yield and sweetness. Rewalk, a wearable robotic exoskeleton that allows individuals with spinal cord injuries to walk again. With this invention, disabled people can walk again. Drip irrigation. Developed in the 60s, drip irrigation has revolutionized agriculture by enabling more efficient use of water, increasing crop yields, and reducing water waste. Orcam, a wearable device that uses computer vision and artificial intelligence to assist people who are visually impaired or blind in navigating their surroundings and recognizing text and faces. Israel started using AI before it was cool. Israel is a success story, a blessing.
Hay un libro que tiene, digamos, o sea.
I wanted to share this one last before we close for the day. He's become our big star, Javier Milei, the president of Argentina. And I was looking through other stuff after I was looking at that jerk from Brazil. And so you're looking up a jerk from Brazil and the algorithm of YouTube. Next thing you know, you got Javier Milei up there. And for those of us who are Orthodox Jews and who have certain rabbis who have been very important in our lives, some of the greatest of rabbis have done some of their best teaching on Shabbos, but you can't write on Shabbos. So I had described earlier today purposefully about the Mashad guy who would listen to my speech and then tell over the whole speech. There are certain rabbis, Rabbi Victor Miller, Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, where their words are deemed to be so extraordinarily important to their students that when they would speak on Shabbos or otherwise teach classes, some of their best students afterwards would get together and would recreate what from their notes or what they heard, what did the Rebbe say? And then they write it down and they preserve it. And in some cases, they actually show it to the original, the Rebbe, to approve, is this what you said? We think. So we've taken your oral teaching and we've created a written document. And that's not extraordinary to hear about when you're an Orthodox Jew and you're in that world. But Javier Milei, a Catholic from Argentina who's gotten into Lubavitch Hasidism, he heard about this, how they got books of the Rebbe's teaching. And he's being interviewed. It's only a 2-minute interview, but I love this. He's being interviewed by a guy in Argentina who couldn't care less about this. It's not what he wants to hear. He wants to hear, we just elected a new president. What's your policies? What's your economic policy? What's your foreign policy? What's your domestic policy? Where do you stand on taxation? And he's trying to get, and suddenly Milei, for a minute and a half, and I love looking at Milei's face and his voice and his eyes and comparing it to the interviewer who's like waiting for this to come to an end so he can get back to what he really wants to talk about. But Milei, this is what Milei wants to talk about. Anyway, enough said. So just look at the two guys, the interviewer and Milei.
Enseñanzas del Rebbe, ¿sí? Y entonces cuando vos vas, digamos, te suelen regalar ese libro. Ahora, ¿cómo es que se escribió eso?
¿Cómo?
Pues eso es lo interesante. El Rebbe daba, digamos, hablaba en Shabbat. Pero ¿cuál es el problema? Vos no podés escribir, no podés hacer nada. Entonces, ¿cómo es que se escribió eso? ¿Sí o no?
Sí, ¿cómo se escribió?
Ah, esto es lo interesante. Bueno, había 5 rabinos que se aprendían de memoria el discurso del Rebbe. Y cuando terminaba el Shabbat escribían. Y el Rebbe después iba y lo editaba, lo revisaba. Bueno, tuve la posibilidad, tuve el honor, uno de esos rabinos, ¿sí?, volcó en un libro esas enseñanzas. Y tuve el privilegio de que me lo regalara y me lo autografiara.
¿Qué estudió?
Para, dame un segundo más. Después, cuando vos ves los videos del Rebbe, hay un rabino detrás que tiene una barba blanca, larga. Bueno, es con otros que estuve reunido. Y después me fui a rezar al Oel. O sea, no fui a hacer nada vinculado ni a la economía, ni a negocio, ni a política, ni nada por el estilo.
Anyway.
The show was to start at 8:30, but according to the Rialto, the cancellation was due to safety concerns and short staffing. Tonight, I spoke with the artist, Matisyahu, about the cancellation and what he was told by management.
Can you tell me what you know about the situation?
Yeah, I know that a sponsor backed out from the Rialto because they were put some pressure on, or they have some problem with whatever they think that I stand for.
Matisyahu's management team quickly found another venue at the Club Rock off Park Avenue, offering the show for free. We reached out to the Rialto asking for clarification on the cancellation and received a statement from Executive Director Kathy Rivers, who said in part, "Let me be very clear on this situation. The decision to not have Matisyahu play tonight was not made about politics or religion. The decision was made based on safety." People who came for the concert had their own view of why the show was canceled.
It's typically what we would call anti-Semitism. I don't call it anti-Semitism. I know it's the PC word, but it's Jew hatred. It's racism.
So do you think that's what's behind the cancellation?
Absolutely.
I heard about what happened down over at Rialto. I wasn't planning on necessarily going to the concert, but after I heard what happened, I decided to come down here and show my support.
Matisyahu says before coming to Tucson, his show in New Mexico was also canceled. Earlier in the evening, security told me there were pro-Palestinian protesters at the club. Matisyahu says he has a message for anyone who's against him taking the stage with his music.
My message is put down your flags and let go of your hatred for a second about something and someone that you truly don't know, and come inside to the show and allow the music to penetrate into your soul and into your heart and melt away all of that hate.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories.
The chant from the river to the sea.
And some of the other things, since we're going late, I'm going to let some of the other things go, and we'll close now with the prayer for the state of Israel, for the armed forces. And next week, God willing, some of the things that I had planned for today, we'll have on, God willing, next week if Mashiach hasn't come first. Thanks so much for being here, and let's get this up on the. Let's just get this up. Let's see what's the best way to do it. Let's try it this way. We'll do that, and then we're going to do that, and then we're going to do that. And let's see if we take that off, we bring that down, and these are some things that are coming up in the future, and we'll conclude with that. Okay.
שברך אבותינו אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, הוא יברך את חיילי צבא הגנה לישראל.
ייתן אדוני את אויבינו הקמים עלינו ניגפים לפניהם. הקדוש ברוך הוא ישמור ויציל את חיילינו מכל צרה וצוקה, מכל נגע ומחלה, וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם. ידבר שונאינו תחתיהם, ויעטרם בכתר ישועה ובעטרת ניצחון, ויקוים בהם הכתוב.
כי